So the past few videos, we've been working with our DDG location. Over the next few videos, we're gonna start working with our DDG profile. And the first thing we're gonna do with that is build the onboard screen that you see here. But time for another challenge. And so it's not just here, build a simple UI. The little extra twist on this challenge, which we will actually handle in the next video, is figure out how to only show this screen once. Right? It's an onboarding screen. We don't want to show it every time we open up the app. Once the user has seen the onboarding screen, we want to persist that somehow so we don't show it again. So if you want to take the challenge an extra step, go ahead and give that a try. And the hint I'll give you is user defaults, not app storage. We'll talk about that in the next video. All right, let's get to building this UI. So as you can see, this is pretty straightforward. We just have a VStack essentially with our logo and then our information views, and then there's a little X button in the upper right. So yeah, like I said, pretty basic. Hopefully this kind of screen is very much review for you by now, but let's go ahead and build it. So in the screens folder, do a Command N for a new file, new SwiftUI view, hit next. We'll call this OnboardView, create. There we go. So like I said, the first thing is a VStack. That's essentially the main structure here. And I'll make this a little bigger, scroll up, and let's get our preview going here so we can see this as we go. Again, always starts off huge, 75%, hit resume, and slide this over a little bit. It's showing nothing because we have nothing in our VStack. Well, let's fix that. So I'm gonna go through this pretty quickly because like I said, this should be review. Well, in the VStack, we'll handle the dismiss X button at the end. Let's get the main structure of the screen going. So the first thing is our logo. So we already have that. If we go back to our location map view, right, you'll notice we have this logo view, which is down here. And in fact, this logo view, because we are gonna use it in multiple screens, I'm going to give it its own file. So I'm gonna cut that, Command X, go up to custom views, hit Command N for a new file in custom views, new SwiftUI view, hit next, call this logo view, create, and just basically replace this struct with what we cut from the previous screen, logo view, except I do want to alter this a little bit because you'll see the frame, we gave it a height of 70. Well, looking at the design, this one is obviously a lot bigger than the one we have on the map view. So we want to pass in a frame here, specifically a frame width to be clear with our names. So var frame width, and I know this says height, but we're actually going to change that. And that is going to be a CG float. So now our logo image view is going to take in a frame width variable. So we'll call this width, and then for the width, we'll pass in frame width. Right, and you'll see us use this in a second. So, for our preview, let's just go ahead and hard code 250, so it's bigger. Hit resume on our preview just to make sure we got this looking good, up and running. What did we forget? Oh, it's still yelling at us from, now that we changed our logo view, we're not passing in a frame here on our map view. So let's go ahead and hit return on the shadow, put that down there, because now we have some parameters here, and I want to make that 125. That's on the map, by the way. So what I did to get 125 is, I know it's a 16:9 image. I know because I created that. And before I had a frame height of 70. So if you take the ratio of 16:9, I think it's like 1.7777, multiply 70 by that, and you get to 125. So that's how I just switched that from height to width, essentially, to keep the same size. So that's on our map view. Let's go back to our logo view, just to make sure our preview does work, to make sure we're not like anything's broken. There we go. There's our logo view. So now back to our onboard view, we're just going to use that logo view. Logo view, and the frame width is 250. That's the one we used down there. So hit resume on our preview here. We should see the same thing we saw just on our logo view because that's all we have. But that is the first element in our VStack. So pulling up the design, the next element is a little more intricate. It is a VStack because we have these three kind of components. However, it's an H stack within our VStack. Okay, so let's add that VStack. And then within that VStack, we're gonna have 3 H stacks. What I'm gonna do is build the first H stack, and then we're gonna refactor it out because again, it's the same style to create the rest. So the first H stack we pull up the design. You can see there's an SF symbol on the left, and then to the right of that is a VStack with like a title and then a little description. So that's what we're creating. So the first element in our H stack is an image, and then it is a system name because we are using an SF symbol, and that system name is, let me pull up SF symbols because it's a weird one. So we're gonna type in building, and you'll notice it had that building circle around it, right? We're going for this circular look here. So that's building.2.crop.2.circle, right? So we're gonna right click, copy name, back to Xcode, and paste that in there. There we go. And then you can see it showed up on our preview, super small. Of course, we need to fix that. Let's go .resizable and then .frame. We're going to give it a 50 by 50 frame. So 50 by 50. And real quick on this note, like there's been some comments about people that use their SF symbols. Instead of giving it a frame, they'll give it like a size of .title or .headline because SF symbols are kind of a font. So the downside to that is that, it may look good when you just do, .title 2 and it's fine. However, that means it's going to conform to dynamic type, which means if somebody has their dynamic type setting all the way down to super, super small or all the way up to extra, extra large, your SF symbols are also going to scale with that. And we're using them as UI elements, not necessarily a font. So that scaling up or down may break your UI. So we don't want that. So that's why when I use them as like icons and stuff, I hard code the frame because I don't want those to scale with dynamic type. And then the last thing, we don't want it to be black. We want it to be .foreground color, .brand primary. There we go. And then, so that is the left side of our H stack. The right side of our H stack is going to be another V stack, right? Because we have our title and then our description. So again, that is going to be text. And then this one is called restaurant locations. And that is going to be .bold. And we're keeping it the same, the body font. And then the next text will be text. And then here's where we're kind of give the description of what we mean by that, which is find places to dine around the convention center. And now we do want to format this a little bit, right? So we definitely want foreground color .secondary, and then we want to do .line limit 2. We only want this to be 2 lines, and then minimum scale factor, right? Because we do want it to shrink to 0.75, just like we've always been doing. And you'll notice our alignment's messed up. We're gonna fix that here, but I want to get this in place. So there's the first element in our H stack. And before we align our V stack and all that stuff, let's get the other 2 in there. But what I'm going to do, command click on the H stack, extract subview, and then we can just rename it right here. We'll call this onboard info view, right? And of course it is going to take in some parameters. So we'll start replacing this here. So the parameters we want to pass in are var image name, and that is a string, right? Because we're going to pass in that building.to.crop circle. Move this up. You can see we also want to pass in the title and then the description, right? Because those are going to be dynamic. So var title, it's also a string, and then var description is also a string. So before we replace these, I'm going to create one. You see we need the parameters there, and I'm going to put these on extra lines for ease of readability. So before I replace these, I don't want to retype these again. So I'm going to cut the building.crop.to whatever, paste it. Going to cut restaurant locations, paste it. Going to cut the description, paste it. There we go. So now in our we need to replace that here, right? So the image system name is image name, and then our text here is title, and then our text down here is description. Right, let's do a command B. Cool, so our onboard info view is just a refactored out view. That way we don't have to have 3 of them up here. But what I can do now is copy that onboard info view, paste, and then we just need to change the descriptions here. But let's hit resume and see what we got on our preview. There we go, not looking like how we want. So let's put in the right information and then we'll work on that alignment. So pulling up the design, you see we have the check mark in a circle and then the person in a circle. So let's look for those. Back to SF symbols. So I believe I did check, right? And yep, there it is, check mark dot circle, right click, copy name, back to Xcode, paste it in here for the image name. And the reason I'm doing the images both first is because that way I can be done with SF symbols. And then I believe it was person, and I'm looking for one with the 2 people in the circle here. Yes, right here. Because I want to like indicate like, hey, you can find your friends. So person.to.circle, right click, copy name, back to Xcode, and paste it down here. There we go. Okay, looking a little cramped. We're gonna fix that. But this title is now check in. Right? And then we want to basically explain what the app does and how you can check in. And we'll say, let other iOS devs know where you are. And then this last title is find friends. And we'll say, see where other iOS devs are and join the party. Okay, so we have our information in these onboard info views. not looking great, right? You can see it's aligned center, so things aren't lining up right. So that's the first thing we want to do is align left. Now there's two places we want to do this. We want to do this on the overall V stack that holds all the H stacks. So we'll do that alignment, and that is .leading, right? So now you can see everything lined up on the left with our SF symbols. That's what we wanted. But now the other V stack that has our title and our description, we want that to align left as well. So that V stack is down here in our onboard info view, right? You see that here. So again, we can add the alignment parameter there, and we'll say .leading again. So now you can see those all lined up. Still not exactly what we want, right? We want some padding on our H stack, right? We don't want this to be up against the edges. So up here on this V stack that holds all of our onboard views, we can do .padding. There you go. That brought them in a little bit. Now our SF symbols and our title and description, those are a bit too close. But I don't want to add padding to any of them. I want to add spacing in between the elements of the H stack. So that H stack is again down here in our onboard info view. So this overall H stack, let's add the spacing parameter just to space it out, and I had 26. And again, I just dialed this in. Again, what I did, I pulled up this kind of reference and tried to recreate this what's new, Apple type screen. So that's where I got this spacing and how I figured all this out. But there are still some little tweaks I wanted to do. So this V stack right here that holds our title and location, that felt a little cramped to me. So I wanted to add a little bit of extra spacing there. So you can do the spacing parameter on that V stack, and I believe I did 4. Again, just to space it out just a little bit. Like I said, I was really dialing it in and tweaking it. And then on that note, these also felt a little cramped vertically. So back up to this V stack where we did the alignment leading of the overall onboard info views, I want to add a little extra vertical spacing in between them. So that's why we added the spacing parameter here. And I believe I did 32, 34. I really wanted them spaced out. Now, finally, what I did to move them in a little bit, because I still think, even though we have padding on it, it's still a little close to the left. So what I did was I changed this padding to .horizontal, and then I gave it a 30, and that moved it in a little bit more. But by making this just horizontal and getting rid of the vertical, now I feel like my dub logo is a little cramped. So on the logo view, we'll just add padding .bottom. And yeah, that just lets it breathe a little bit more. So the last thing we need to do is add our little circle X dismiss button to the top right. So to do that, at the top of our overall V stack, we're going to add an H stack, which has a spacer on the left and our X button on the right that pushes it all the way over. So up here in the V stack, let's do H stack. And, we want a spacer to push something over all to the right, and we want a button here, which this button will do something here in a little bit, label, and then here's where we want to design our X dismiss button, which is going to be reusable. If you look at this modal that I have here, you see we use it there, so we'll write it out here first, we'll refactor it out because we are going to reuse this. And we're going to do some refactoring on some other views where we did this before, where this whole Z stack might not be necessary. You can just do a background with a clip shape. However, in this case, it is necessary for a little touch target trick that I'm going to show you. So we'll do a Z stack here. The bottom layer of the Z stack is our circle, and that is going to be a frame of 30 by 30. Foreground color is .brand primary. And then now let's put our XSF symbol on top of it. So that's an image with system name, and then that's just X mark. Use that one a bunch of times, don't need to look that one up. And we'll do foreground color .white, and then image scale .small. All right, so we'll make the X a little small. You can see, now here's the touch target trick that I'm going to do. I'm going to give it a frame width and height of 44 by 44, and we'll talk about this here in a second. So where's my red square on the image? Come on previews. Okay, for some reason my red squares aren't showing up, but I'll probably put it up there in post. But by making this frame 44, you can see that the actual frame is bigger than you can see, right? It's bigger than our 30 by 30 circle. So what that does is whenever they tap that frame, even though it's kind of invisible, it'll still act like the button was tapped. So again, if you've ever tried to tap these small buttons and it's not working, that's because the touch target is on the actual button. We're kind of making an invisible touch target that's 44 by 44, so it's not so annoying to tap these buttons. And I like to do that on my smaller elements. So again, that's why I didn't just have my background be 30 by 30 in a clip shape of a circle, right? I wanted a separate frame for my image for that reason. Like I said, the other ones though, the people that brought up doing it that way, that's a good point, and we're going to refactor that later. But for now, we're going to keep this one. And like I said, this right here, we are going to reuse this X dismiss button. So I want to cut that. And again, in custom views, actually, you know what? In custom views, do right click, new group, because this is how the organization starts to come in. Call it buttons, and then new file, call it a SwiftUI view, hit next, X dismiss button. Hit create, and then again, paste in, replace the text with that Z stack that we had, hit resume. There you go, you see a little X button, there you go. Now you can see the example of the touch target, right? You see the red square? They can touch anywhere in that square. So you can see how, you kind of alleviate that annoying trying to tap small buttons. So now that we have our buttons folder, let's actually take our DDG button, drag that up real quick, right? So now we're starting to organize this a bit. Okay, back to our onboard view. Here, let's say X dismiss button. There we go. We'll come back and actually add the button action later. Hit resume. This is not where we want it, right? We want this in the very upper right-hand corner. So let's put a spacer in between this H stack and the rest of our V stack. Cool. Now it's in the upper right-hand corner, but now everything else is down to the bottom. Well, to fix that, we can add a spacer after the bottom V stack to basically center the bulk of our content. And I put that in the wrong thing. So Command X right here, paste it there. That is a tricky thing with SwiftUI, especially again, my font is blown up so big so you can see it. Normally I can see like the whole structure and that's easy, but yeah, one of the pitfalls of SwiftUI there. But now you can see our onboard screen is centered. We have our X dismiss button in the upper right. Now in a couple videos, we're gonna do like an overall project refactor. Remember I said you should do that periodically just so things don't get out of control. But I do wanna talk about refactoring this view real quick because you see, we could refactor out this whole H stack and call it, X dismiss button H stack or whatever. We could refactor this V stack so it's just called, onboard info V stack or something like that to really tighten this up. But I wanna talk about like when and where you should do that. So on this screen, I'm not too interested in doing that because if you look, it's only, 11 to 44, like 33 lines of code. And there's a lot of spaces in here, that we can like clean up a little bit. So it's not that big. If this view was like 150 lines of code, 200 lines of code, yeah, then I probably would start refactoring out these big elements into something that's, one line. Two, again, back to my overall philosophy, make my view read like a table of contents. I do that when the view gets really big. When the view is relatively small, 30, 40 lines of code, maybe I don't do that. Again, just some insights into the judgment on like when and where to refactor things. And again, that is all personal preference, personal style. Okay, so our UI is done. In the next video, we're actually gonna like make this screen show up and dismiss, and then we're also gonna persist it so we only see it once.